Auntie, Auntie, they found Efe.
Akim's voice pierced the air as he ran frantically towards Annabel, his eyes wild with panic. Annabel's hands flew open, releasing the bucket she was holding. As she rushed to meet Akim, her heart racing with a mother's instinct. "My boy, they found my Efe!" she screamed, her voice cracked with desperation. Without waiting for an answer, she took off after Akim, following the direction of his outstretched arm. "Where is he? Who has him? Tell me," she cried, her panic and anxiety boiling over as she chased after the truth. Have you ever found yourself in a community where you are thoroughly screened before you are given access to live there? This was the reality in the small, close-knit town of Asha. Life used to be simple and predictable. The town was known for its vibrant markets where locals would gather to buy and sell everything from fresh produce to colorful fabrics. The air was thick with the aroma of sizzling meat, and the sound of laughter and chatter filled the streets. However, beneath the town's warm exterior, a sense of unease lingered. Children had been going missing at an alarming rate. Parents and authorities were baffled. The police had been called in, but despite their efforts, the culprit remained at large. The once peaceful town was now gripped with fear, and the streets that were once filled with children's laughter were now empty and silent. In this tense atmosphere, a new family arrived in town. Madame Rose, a short, fair and chubby woman with a kind face and a warm smile, moved into a small house on the outskirts of the market. She was accompanied by her husband, Mr. Festus, a tall, dark and slim man who kept to himself. The couple was an unlikely pair, with Madame Rose's outgoing personality contrasting sharply with Mr. Festus's reserved nature. Madame Rose quickly won over the hearts of the townspeople with her friendly demeanor and her unique business venture. She started selling dried cow skin, popularly known as kponmo, in large bags as wholesale. Kponmo was of exceptional quality, and soon she became the go-to supplier for many of the local restaurants and food vendors. People would come from all over to buy kponmo, and Madame Rose would always greet them with a warm smile and a kind word. "You look so lovely today, Tina. Thank you for coming, eh? Send my love to your mother," you will hear her say to a customer. She became known as Madame Rose, the correct kponmo seller, and her name was on everyone's lips. But Madame Rose's life was not without its challenges. She and her husband were childless. This was both a source of pity and mockery from the townspeople. While some made derogatory remarks when Madame Rose touched their children, some other kind neighbors allowed their children to play with her and run errands for her. She would often give them small treats and pats on the back, and she began to earn more affection and admiration. As Madame Rose's business grew, so did her popularity. She was loved by all, including the keke drivers who transported kponmo to the market. Not everyone was happy about her success either. Some of the other kponmo sellers, who had been forced to lower their prices to compete with Madame Rose, grew jealous of her popularity. They began to spread rumors that she used diabolical means to sell kponmo. But Madame Rose refused to let their malicious gossips get to her. She remained kind and generous, always willing to lend a helping hand to those in need. As the days went by, the town of Asha continued to grapple with the mystery of the missing children. The police were no closer to catching the culprits, and the townspeople were at a loss for what to do. One day, something happened in the neighborhood. The son of a close friend and neighbor of Madame Rose, Efe, went missing on his way back from school. His mother, Annabel, wailed uncontrollably. The incident shook the neighborhood as everybody loved Ife. They held another community meeting to decide what to do to find the missing boy. At the meeting, different suggestions were made, but still, nobody could point out how to find the boy. Because Madame Rose was close to Annabel, Madame Rose always went there to check up on her and console her. She brought her food to eat. This act of kindness made the people love her more, and even those who hated her before were beginning to have a change of heart. Madame Rose stopped going to her shop to stay with her friend and comfort her. After 2 days, Madame Rose resumed her business. A week passed and nothing was heard about Ife. Everybody gradually went back to their usual activities. One fateful day, Madame Rose called one of her keke drivers as usual to come pick the sacks of kponmo at her house and take them to the usual destination after she had finished drying the kponmo. The keke driver, named Musa, happily pulled up at her compound. Business had been dwindling in the past week due to the recent turnout of events. Investigations had revealed that the kidnapped boy Ife had been kidnapped by a keke driver, so a stiff curfew had been placed on keke rides in the town, and it had taken its toll on the riders who depended on it for a source of livelihood. Musa waited outside while Madame Rose and her husband brought out the sacks containing the kponmo. As they brought the sacks out, Musa took them and arranged them in his keke. Several minutes passed after the first 2 sacks were brought out, and Musa grew impatient. "Madame Rose, you dey delay me oo," he shouted. Just then, Madame Rose emerged with a small sack in her hand. "I'm sorry, my husband is bringing out the last sack. Please put this one inside the keke, let me go and help him with the last sack," Madame Rose pleaded with Musa. Musa nodded and carried the sack to where he had put the rest in the back seat of his keke. He placed the new sack on top of another one and was about to leave when the sack he just placed was about to fall out. He quickly brought it down and decided to adjust the other sacks to accommodate the last sack. As he shifted one of the sacks, he noticed that there was a blood stain on the seat. Musa was surprised because he had been helping them transport the sacks of kponmo, and this was the first time he was seeing blood on any of them. He checked the sack and saw that it was slightly torn. He decided to use a rag to cover that part that was torn. Just then, he noticed that the meat peeping out of the sack looked rather strange. Curious, he decided to quickly open the sack, and when he did, he was so shocked at what he saw that he screamed out. At that moment, Madame Rose's husband brought the last sack out and saw him screaming. "Oga, wetin be this?" he asked, bewildered. "Why did you open the sack?" Mr. Festus thundered. Musa stared at him in disbelief. "Na wetin una dey do be this?" Musa shouted. Musa turned to run out of the compound, and that was his biggest mistake because as soon as he turned, he felt the sharp blade of a cutlass on his neck. A loud scream tore out of his mouth before he fell to the ground, dead. 30 minutes passed since Musa went into Madame Rose's compound, and Musa's friends and fellow keke drivers had not seen him. It was unusual for Musa to stay that long in Madame Rose's compound. His friends decided to go there to be sure he had left there. On getting to Madame Rose's compound, they opened the gate and saw Musa's keke parked there with the sacks inside. They were surprised. They moved closer and called him. That was when they saw blood stains on the floor close to the keke. Alarmed, they rushed to knock on the front door and found out the door was not locked. They opened it, and to their surprise, they saw Mr. Festus dragging Musa's body towards the room, while Madame Rose was with a bucket and rag trying to clean off the blood stains on the floor. They raised an alarm. Before Madame Rose and her husband could escape, they were caught and dragged out of the house. "You killed Musa," they shouted. People heard the noise in Madame Rose's compound, and they trooped in to find out what was going on. They were surprised to see Madame Rose and her husband sitting on the floor, being manhandled by the keke drivers. After they had been beaten and wounded by Musa's angry friends, they were allowed to explain what happened. And that was when the people of Asha heard the shock of their lives. Madame Rose and her husband confessed to all the crimes that had been going on in the town. They were behind all the missing children in the town. They had keke riders who were not from Asha town, positioned at strategic places to kidnap children who walked alone or walked without an adult supervision. They had been doing this in Asha and the neighboring towns even before they moved into the town. The kidnapped children were injected immediately they were kidnapped and left to dry up before they packed them in sacks and transported them to the buyers. The dried kponmo meat was a cover to throw off suspicion about the content of the sacks. They arranged kponmo at the top of the sacks before they sent them out. The day luck ran out on them, one of the bodies had not dried up properly before they packed it, and that led to the blood stain on the keke seat, which drew late Musa's attention. The whole town of Asha was shocked and thrown into alarm by the news of Madame Rose's evil deeds. The kind-hearted Madame Rose and her quiet husband were capable of doing such a thing, the townspeople exclaimed. Their house was searched, and in a room, 2 bodies of children dried up were found. The dried body of Madame Rose's neighbor's son, Efe, who went missing 1 week ago, was one of them. He was still in his school uniform. Annabel arrived at the scene and pounced on Madame Rose in fierce rage. Angry crowd joined as they began to eat the husband and tear their clothes. The parents of some of the children who had been kidnapped cried bitterly, laying curses on Madame Rose and her husband. Soon, the young boys threw tires around the necks of the couples and began to pour petrol on them, ready to burn them alive. The community heard and some elders stopped them and called the police instead. Let them face the wrath of the law, they said. If we take laws into our hands, we become murderers like them. People grudgingly agreed, and Madame Rose and her husband were arrested by the police and taken to court. With the evidence and the people's testimonies against them, Madame Rose and her husband were both sentenced to life imprisonment. After that incident, any new resident moving into the town of Asha was thoroughly vetted before they were allowed into the neighborhood. The people of Asha never remained the same again after that incident, but their children became safe again. What lesson stood out for you in this story about Madame Rose and her husband? Let's learn. Please share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this story and you would love to see more stories like this, kindly hit the subscribe button below this video and turn on the notification bell so that you can get notified when the next story is published here. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video.